You ever look around and feel like everybody got the instruction manual for life except you? Seriously, one person is buying a house, another person is getting promoted, someone else is posting pictures from a vacation that somehow looks expensive and relaxing at the same time, and then there's you, standing in your kitchen at 11:43 p.m., eating cereal straight from the box, wondering if you're secretly 3 years behind schedule. If you've ever felt that way, today's conversation might hit a little differently, because according to the ideas of Carl Jung, some people are not designed to peak early. Some people are not built for fast success. They're built for deep success. And those are two completely different things. The funny thing is, society treats life like a race. Everybody is sprinting. Everybody is comparing. Everybody is checking where everyone else is. Meanwhile, a certain type of person is moving through life feeling completely out of sync. Not because they're lazy, not because they're incapable, not because they lack talent, but because they're busy asking questions most people never stop long enough to ask. Questions like, who am I really? What do I actually want? Why does success that impresses everyone else not impress me? And that's where things get interesting. Because Jung believed that some personalities spend the first half of life building something invisible, something nobody can see, something nobody applauds, something that doesn't look impressive on Instagram. They're building themselves. Now I know. That sounds nice. But when you're watching your friends move ahead while you're still trying to figure out your purpose, it doesn't feel nice. It feels frustrating. It feels confusing. It feels like showing up to a movie 30 minutes late and pretending you know what's happening. You smile. You nod. But inside you're thinking, what in the world is going on? And here's the crazy part. Many people who later become incredibly fulfilled spend years believing they're failing. Years, not weeks, not months. Years. Because their growth doesn't happen outwardly first. It happens inwardly first. And inward growth is sneaky. Nobody throws a party because you became more self-aware. Nobody gives you a trophy because you healed an old wound. Nobody sends congratulations because you finally stopped pretending to be someone you're not. Yet those things often matter more than any promotion, more than any title, more than any achievement. Jung had a word for this process. He called it individuation, a fancy word that basically means becoming who you actually are, not who your parents wanted, not who society wanted, not who your friends expected. You, the real you. And here's the thing nobody tells you. That journey is messy. It's awkward. It's confusing. It's like trying to assemble furniture without the instructions. You think you've got it figured out. Then suddenly you're holding 3 random screws, wondering where everything went wrong. Can anybody relate to that? If so, drop a comment below and tell me, have you ever felt like you're moving through life on a different timeline than everyone else? I genuinely want to know, because I think more people feel this way than they admit. They just don't talk about it. And maybe that's why you're here today. Maybe you've spent years feeling different. Maybe you've always felt a little out of place, like you could never fully fit into the mold everyone else seemed comfortable wearing. Maybe you've wondered if something was wrong with you. What if the opposite is true? What if the very thing that made you feel behind is the same thing preparing you for a life most people never experience, a life with depth, meaning, wisdom, authenticity? Because here's something I've noticed. The people who bloom early often spend the rest of life protecting what they've built. The people who bloom late spend the rest of life expanding. Big difference. One is maintenance, the other is growth. And Jung believed that growth never really ends, not for the people willing to keep discovering who they are. So today we're going to talk about why the rarest personality types often succeed later in life, why they struggle when they're young, why they feel misunderstood, why they seem lost, and why those very struggles become their greatest advantage later on. Some of these signs might describe someone you know. Some might describe your friend, your partner, your sibling. But I have a feeling more than a few are going to describe you. And if that's true, you may stop seeing your life as delayed and start seeing it as developing. There's a huge difference, and trust me, once you understand that difference, you never look at your journey the same way again. Sign 1. They spend more time questioning than following or right. Let's start with the first reason these rare personality types often succeed later in life. And honestly, this one causes more stress than almost anything else. They question everything. Everything. Not in an annoying way. Well, sometimes in an annoying way. You know that kid who kept asking why. Why is the sky blue? Why do adults drink coffee if it tastes like burnt sadness? Why do we have to do things this way? Why? 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 Most people eventually stop asking. These personalities don't. They just get older. That's the difference. They become adults who still look at life and ask, why are we all doing this? Why is success defined this way? Why am I chasing goals I don't even care about? And that's where the trouble begins, because society loves followers. Followers are predictable. Followers fit neatly into systems. Followers make everybody comfortable. Questioners, not so much. Questioners make people nervous. You tell them, this is the right path. And they say, according to who? Now suddenly the conversation gets awkward. You can almost hear the record scratch, because most people aren't looking for truth. They're looking for certainty. Big difference. And Jung understood this. He noticed that certain individuals couldn't simply accept the ready-made answers handed to them. They needed to discover their own. The problem is, that process takes time. A lot of time. While everyone else is running down a straight road, the questioner keeps stopping, looking around, checking side paths, examining signs, getting distracted by ideas, sometimes getting completely lost. And trust me, when you're young, that can feel like failure. Your friends seem sure, you're unsure, your friends seem confident, you're questioning everything. Your friends have 5-year plans, you have 17 tabs open in your brain and none of them are loading properly. It's frustrating, but here's what happens later. The people who spent years questioning eventually develop something powerful, independent thinking. And independent thinking becomes incredibly valuable with age, because life eventually throws everybody a curveball. Everybody. The confident guy, the successful woman, the person who looked like they had everything figured out. Life shows up one day and says, "Good morning. Everything is changing." And suddenly all those borrowed answers stop working. That's when the questioner has an advantage, because they've spent years adapting, years exploring, years learning how to think instead of what to think. And that's a superpower. You know what's funny? Some of the wisest people I've ever met looked completely lost in their 20s. Absolutely lost. If you met them back then, you'd probably think, this person needs a map, maybe 2 maps, and a flashlight. But later, they're the people everyone goes to for advice. Because while others were collecting achievements, they were collecting understanding. And understanding ages really well, better than status, better than trends, better than popularity. Popularity expires faster than milk. Understanding lasts. So if you've spent years feeling like you're overthinking everything, there's a good chance you're not broken. You're developing a skill most people never develop, the ability to think for yourself. And yes, it slows you down, at first. But sometimes slow growth creates deep roots, and deep roots survive storms. Now tell me something. How many of you were the kid who always asked too many questions? Be honest, were you that kid? The one driving teachers crazy? The one making family members sigh dramatically. The one who heard an answer and immediately came back with 3 more questions? If that's you, welcome to the club. Membership is free, confusion is included, but the long-term benefits are surprisingly good. Because the rarest personality types aren't usually trying to fit into the world. They're trying to understand it. And that takes time. A lot more time than most people realize. Which brings us to the second sign. And this one is huge. Because it's the reason so many of these people spend years feeling like outsiders, not because they want to be different, but because pretending to be someone else eventually becomes impossible. Let's talk about that. Sign 2. They can't fake it forever. Now this one is going to make some people laugh, because if you're this personality type, you've probably tried to fit in. You've really tried. You wore the mask. You said the right things. You followed the script. You played the role. For a while. Then one day, your soul basically said, nope. And everything fell apart. Anybody know that feeling? You spend years being the version of yourself everyone likes. Then suddenly, you're exhausted. Not physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. You wake up one morning and realize, I don't even know who I'm performing for anymore. That's a scary moment, but it's also an important one. Jung talked about something called the persona, the social mask, the version of ourselves we show the world. And here's the thing. Everybody has one. Everybody. The problem starts when the mask becomes your entire identity. That's when people lose themselves. These rare personality types struggle with that. Not because they're rebellious, not because they're difficult, but because something inside them keeps pushing for authenticity, even when authenticity is inconvenient, especially when it's inconvenient. And let's be honest, authenticity can be expensive. Sometimes it costs approval. Sometimes it costs comfort. Sometimes it costs relationships. Sometimes it costs opportunities. That's why many people avoid it. It's easier to keep pretending, at least for a while. But these personalities eventually hit a wall, a big one, the kind of wall where you sit alone and think, what am I doing with my life? And that's not a fun conversation. Nobody puts that conversation on social media. Nobody posts, having an identity crisis. Wish me luck. But those moments often become turning points, because once you stop pretending, you finally have a chance to build something real, not impressive, real. And real things take longer. Think about it. A fake plant looks perfect immediately. A real tree takes years. Which one would you rather be? Exactly. The funny thing is, when these people finally stop trying to fit in, their lives often improve dramatically. Not overnight, but steadily. Because all that energy they spent performing can finally be used for growing, and growth changes everything. You stop chasing validation. You start chasing meaning. You stop asking, how do I impress people? And start asking, how do I become myself? That's a completely different journey. And yes, it's slower, but it's worth it. Because eventually something amazing happens. You stop needing everyone's approval. And when that happens, you become dangerous. Not dangerous in a bad way, dangerous in a powerful way. Because people who don't need constant approval become incredibly free. They take risks. They speak honestly. They create boldly. They live authentically. And that's often when success finally begins showing up. Not because they chased it harder, but because they stopped chasing everyone else's definition of it. And honestly, that's one of the most freeing moments a human being can experience. The moment you realize, I don't have to be who everyone expected. Now, in the next part, we're going to talk about something that almost every late bloomer experiences, and if you've ever felt lonely, misunderstood, or like nobody really gets you, this next sign might hit harder than any of the others. Sign 3. They feel misunderstood for years, all right. Let's talk about something that almost nobody enjoys. Feeling misunderstood. Not the cute kind. Not the, haha, nobody understands my obsession with collecting coffee mugs kind. I'm talking about the deeper kind, the kind where people hear your words, but somehow miss your meaning. The kind where you leave conversations thinking, that's not what I meant at all. The kind where you've explained yourself so many times that you're starting to wonder if you speak a different language. These rare personality types deal with that a lot, and when they're younger, it can be painful, because everybody wants connection. Everybody wants to feel seen. Everybody wants that moment where someone says, I get you, and means it. But for some people, those moments don't happen very often, not because they're unlikable, not because they're strange, not because they're doing anything wrong. Sometimes it's because they're operating from a different depth than the people around them. Now, before anybody gets offended, this isn't about being better than anyone else. Depth isn't superiority, it's just difference. Some people love talking about what's happening. Others love talking about why it's happening. Some people discuss events. Others discuss meaning. Some people talk about what people did. Others talk about what it reveals about human nature. And guess which group usually gets weird looks at parties? Exactly. You know the moment. Someone says, "Nice weather today." And somehow your brain immediately jumps to, isn't it fascinating how humans feel emotionally affected by sunlight? Now everybody's looking at you, and you're wondering what happened. You just took the scenic route in the conversation, that's all. But this tendency often makes people feel isolated when they're young, because finding your people takes time, a lot of time. And when you're younger, you often assume the problem is you. You think, maybe I'm too quiet. Maybe I'm too serious. Maybe I'm too different. Meanwhile, the truth is much simpler. You're trying to have conversations with people who aren't asking the same questions you are, that's all. And Jung understood this feeling, because he spent much of his life exploring things many people considered strange. Dreams, symbols, the unconscious mind, inner transformation, the kinds of topics that make some people lean forward with excitement and make others slowly back away toward the exit. But here's what happens later in life, something beautiful. You stop trying to be understood by everyone, and you start focusing on being understood by the right people. Huge difference, massive difference. Because trying to get everybody to understand you is exhausting. It's like trying to explain your favorite song to someone who forgot their headphones. Eventually you realize, not everybody is supposed to understand everything about you, and that's okay. The older these rare personalities get, the more they attract people who resonate with them naturally, people who appreciate depth, people who enjoy meaningful conversations, people who don't panic when discussions get real. And suddenly, the loneliness starts shrinking. Not because the world changed, but because they found their tribe. And here's something funny. Many of the people who felt like outsiders in their 20s become magnets in their 40s and 50s. Why? Because authenticity is attractive. Wisdom is attractive. Self-awareness is attractive. Not in the movie star sense. In the human sense. People trust them. People feel comfortable around them. People seek their advice. And the very thing that once made them feel different becomes the thing that makes them valuable. Funny how life works like that. The qualities that create loneliness early often create connection later. Now, if you've ever spent years feeling misunderstood, I want you to remember something. Being misunderstood isn't always evidence that you're wrong. Sometimes it's evidence that you're early. And that's a completely different story, which brings us to another trait that changes everything. And honestly, this next one might be the biggest reason these personalities succeed late, because while everybody else is chasing speed, they're accidentally developing wisdom. Sign 4. They learn from everything, and I mean everything. Success? They learn from it. Failure, they learn from it. Embarrassing moments they still remember from 2014 at 2 a.m., especially those. You know exactly what I'm talking about. You're lying in bed. Everything is quiet. Life is peaceful. Then your brain suddenly says, "Remember that awkward thing you said 7 years ago?" And now you're staring at the ceiling. Wonderful. Thank you, brain. Very helpful. But here's the interesting thing. Most people try to forget uncomfortable experiences. These personalities study them, not because they enjoy suffering. Nobody enjoys suffering. Well, almost nobody. But because they're naturally reflective. They want to understand. They want meaning. They want lessons. And over time, that creates something powerful. Wisdom. Not knowledge. Wisdom. There's a difference. Knowledge is knowing a tomato is a fruit. Wisdom is knowing not to put it in a fruit salad. Very different skills, and life rewards wisdom, especially later in life, because eventually everyone encounters situations where information isn't enough. You need judgment, you need perspective, you need emotional intelligence, you need experience. And these rare personalities quietly collect those things year after year. Sometimes without even realizing it. Every heartbreak teaches them something. Every disappointment teaches them something. Every wrong turn teaches them something. Every mistake becomes material. And eventually all those lessons start connecting together, like puzzle pieces. Suddenly, experiences that seemed random begin making sense. The breakup, the failure, the rejection, the confusion, the years of feeling lost, all of it contributed something, all of it shaped them, all of it prepared them. Now here's the part nobody likes hearing. This process takes time, lots of time, which is exactly why these people often appear to succeed later. They're building something beneath the surface, something invisible, and invisible growth doesn't get applause. Nobody claps when roots grow. People only notice when the tree gets tall. But without roots, no tree. Without inner growth, no lasting success. And that's one reason Jung believed psychological development becomes increasingly important as we age. Because eventually external achievements stop being enough. You start wanting something deeper. Meaning, purpose, fulfillment, connection. And the people who spent years developing internally are often better prepared for that stage of life. They've already been asking those questions. They've already been doing that work, which means when others begin searching for meaning, they're already several steps ahead. Now, don't misunderstand. That doesn't mean their lives are perfect. Nobody's life is perfect. Anybody who says otherwise is probably trying to sell you something. But it does mean they often navigate life's challenges with greater depth. And depth becomes incredibly valuable over time. In fact, the next sign is something almost every late bloomer experiences. And if you've ever felt like your biggest weakness somehow became your greatest strength, you're going to relate to this one immediately. Because these personalities have a strange habit. They turn pain into power. A sign 5. They turn pain into power. All right. This is where things start to get interesting, because if you've been following along so far, you might have noticed a pattern. These rare personality types don't avoid pain. They don't escape it. They don't pretend it's not happening. They sit with it, and then somehow they turn it into something useful. Not immediately, of course. At first it just hurts like everyone else. Let's be honest. Nobody is sitting there during heartbreak saying, "Ah, yes, character development loading." No, it's more like, why is my chest doing this weird thing, and why does everything remind me of that one conversation I shouldn't have had? Yeah, that's more accurate. But here's what's different. Over time, these personalities don't just feel pain. They start analyzing it. Not in a cold way, in a reflective way. They start asking, what did this teach me? Why did this affect me so deeply? What part of me is being revealed here? And slowly, something shifts. Pain stops being just pain. It becomes information. Now, Jung would probably call this integration. But let's keep it simple. It means nothing gets wasted. Nothing. Not the breakup. Not the rejection. Not the humiliation you still randomly remember while brushing your teeth. All of it becomes material for growth. And this is where late success starts to make sense. Because people who turn pain into understanding eventually develop something rare, emotional strength. Not the fake kind where you say, "I'm fine," while your life is clearly on fire. No, the real kind. The kind where you can feel deeply and still stand steady. You don't become numb, you become aware. And awareness changes everything. Because while other people are running from discomfort, you start learning from it. And over time, that becomes a superpower. Let me put it simply. Most people avoid pain. These personalities extract value from it. That's a massive difference. One runs away from the teacher, the other sits in class even when it's uncomfortable. And guess who learns more? Exactly. Now let's be real for a second. This doesn't feel good while it's happening. Nobody enjoys it. It can feel isolating, heavy, sometimes even a little unfair, like life is giving everyone else easier assignments. But here's the twist. Those easier assignments often don't build depth. They build speed, and speed fades. Depth stays. Which is why, later in life, people who have developed emotional resilience tend to stand out. They don't collapse easily. They don't get shaken by every small storm. They've already survived internal storms most people never talk about. So when external storms come, they're not new, they're familiar. Now let's move to something even more important, because this next sign is where everything starts aligning. This is the moment where all the confusion, all the delay, all the "why is my life like this?" finally starts to make sense. Sign 6. Their success doesn't follow a linear timeline. All right, let's talk about timelines, because society loves timelines. By 20 you should be figuring things out. By 25 you should be successful. By 30 you should be stable. By 35 you should be established. And by 40, apparently, you should be a perfectly optimized human being with zero confusion, no emotional chaos, and a houseplant that never dies, which is hilarious, because that's not how real life works, especially not for these personalities. Their journey looks nothing like a straight line. It looks like progress. Pause. Confusion, insight, reset, breakthrough, silence, chaos, clarity, repeat. It's messy, it's non-linear, it looks like they're behind, until suddenly they're not, and everyone else is confused. Because while others were climbing steadily, these personalities were building something underground, invisible progress, private development, internal upgrades, and then one day, it all connects. Like someone finally plugging in the last piece of a machine that's been quietly assembling itself for years. And suddenly things start working. Opportunities show up. Skills click. Confidence stabilizes. Clarity arrives. But it doesn't feel like luck. It feels like recognition. Like something finally aligning after a long delay. Now here's the part people miss. Late success isn't random. It's accumulated. Every confusing year was not wasted. Every detour was not failure. Every pause was not stagnation. It was preparation. But preparation doesn't look impressive. That's the problem. Nobody claps for preparation. They clap for results. So during the preparation phase, these personalities often feel invisible, overlooked, undervalued, sometimes even forgotten. But internally, they're changing, deeply. And when that internal structure becomes strong enough, external success starts to feel almost inevitable, not because the world suddenly changed, but because they finally became ready for it. And readiness matters more than timing.